I should actually check in because this is a little repetitive with the prior presentation, so I just want to know who are from large corporates in the audience. Okay, okay. I think it's less than earlier. If it's like 4 of you, I'm gonna change the topic then. I'm just gonna go to towards the end where I just talk about general trends in technology I see from Silicon Valley, and then I'll skip the middle part since I think the corporate people probably left, most of them. Sorry. You can always like ask me, and let's just make it open Q&A. If you have any questions, just raise your hands, and I'll be happy to answer them. So like I mentioned, I'm a co-founder of SparkLabs Group. The way to think about us is currently we have 9 startup accelerators throughout the world. We started the first one in December 2012 in Seoul, South Korea, and then we've expanded to Taipei, Beijing, where we have a partnership with CITIC. We launched, I think the person mentioned before on the IoT talk, we have a partnership with Songdo. It's a $35 billion smart city that Korea built from the ground up. We're the exclusive testbed provider there. Then we also launched an AgTech Food Tech Accelerator in Sydney and Orange, Australia. With the government of New South Wales. So similar to Songdo, the government has provided our startups access to over 30,000 acres of farmland. We launched a corporate accelerator with Ping An Insurance, which is the largest insurance company in China. We recently also launched an energy-focused accelerator in Oman, a cybersecurity accelerator in Washington, D.C. And then we're excited about a new framework that we've launched focused on major research universities throughout the world. So our first one is with Arizona State University in the US, but we're talking with others in China and Europe. Also just some quick background, I'll go back. A year ago, Facebook chose us as one of the premier partners for their new innovation lab in South Korea. So we're one of 2 entities globally outside of Silicon Valley that's working with Facebook. And then just background, we've invested in over 230 companies across 6 continents. Some of them are Lyft that recently went IPO. Mimibox, it's a leading beauty e-commerce play that started in South Korea, but now they're based out of the US. And a third of their revenue is from China, third from Korea, third from the US. Andela is, they recently closed a $100 million Series D from Generation Capital, which is Al Gore's firm. And Mark Zuckerberg's family office led their B round, and that was actually Zuckerberg's first investment. So I'll pass the corporate stuff. How do you stay innovative? Okay. Build or buy. The corporate people could ask me or email me later anytime. Okay. So these are just some trends that we see from Silicon Valley, where data really is the future and it matters today. Because when we launched, especially our seed fund, in 2013, that fund focuses mainly on the US. And we would see, let's say in industries such as IoT and manufacturing, we would see these companies collect billions of data points. But the problem 5-6 years ago was that we don't think they were as sophisticated as today in terms of the packaging and analytics. And also back then, the Fortune 500 companies in the US weren't willing to pay for it. So fast forward now, the past 2 years, not only in obvious industries such as IoT and manufacturing are Fortune 500 and 1,000 companies willing to pay for such services, now we've seen it across various verticals. So example is the company I mentioned before, Mimibox. They have 4 legs of revenue. The first is regular, a beauty box e-commerce. Then they have regular e-commerce, and they did a white label service. And the 4th leg was a data service. So they started collecting data from their suppliers, like L'Oreal, Johnson & Johnson, Sephora, et cetera. They packaged it and sold it back. Last year, one of the big companies came with an offer of $500 million to acquire them. And one of the main reasons is because of their new data service. They turned it down, and then all the investors agreed that they're on a good path, so we were comfortable with that. Another company that was also shown is PetNet. So they're an IoT hardware play. It's consumer facing. You could feed your cat or dog remotely with your mobile app. But what they did early on was they acquired a database of dog breeds, and then they started matching it with the pet food that the dogs ate. And the #1 health problem for dogs is overeating, but then they also started recommending pet food. And then a year later, they launched a pet food subscription service that had a 70% uptake. So also now they're in talks with a top 3 pet food provider in the US to get acquired for, I could say, north of $200–300 million. But what's also interesting for us is that there's also been a shift where most startups, they try to disrupt the middleman. So this past year, we also invested in a company called Populous. So what Populous does is they actually aggregate mobility data. In the US, certain cities such as Chicago, DC, New York, they're required to Lyft and Uber are required by these cities to provide their data to the city planners. And in return, they get preferential parking at their airports. But the problem is that Lyft and Uber, they don't want to deal with this, so they just do a data dump. And the cities, they don't really have the data scientists or the capability to use that data effectively. So what Populous did is that they've become a middleman where they aggregate not only the Lyft and Uber data, they also acquire it from scooter companies, bike companies, traffic data. They package it, nice, beautiful dashboard, and then they sell it now to the cities, but also car manufacturers. So it's interesting, in this new data age, I think we'll see more and more of these middleman data players, which is the opposite of what most startups do. And then we also see the continued dominance of the big 5. There's definitely a talent war, especially in AI and machine learning throughout Silicon Valley. These were the market caps I pulled up, I think, like a week or 2 ago. And then, you know, they've trended like crossing the trillion threshold a few times over the past months. So it's Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, and Facebook. And they all have incredible cash reserves right now. But what's also interesting is Asia and China's prominence in this. So China also has 9 out of the top 20 largest internet companies in the world. One of the last points I'd like to bring up is it's interesting. I live in Palo Alto, and for the past several years, I see Waymo's cars, you know, go around. You know, the autonomous driving, self-driving vehicles. They're in simple suburban roads, so maybe this isn't that surprising, but a lot of those cars have gone over 800,000 miles without an accident, right? So I think everyone worldwide, whether it's 3, 5, or 10 years from now, believe that self-driving is here to stay. And it's a matter of certain technical challenges that they have to overcome, such as left turn signals on fast oncoming traffic. You know, there's other like roads that aren't sort of highly visible lines. So there's certain technical challenges that they have to overcome, but eventually I think level 4, level 5 autonomous driving will be here. So I think that's why all the major car companies, they all have centers in Silicon Valley, and they're all very fearful of becoming dumb pipes. And so not only, you know, outside of Silicon Valley, you might not see this, but now it's not just a matter of investing in the technology. They're looking at how they become relevant in the next 10, 20 years. So now they're creating ecosystems and thinking and planning already ahead in terms of what services they'll provide with these self-driving cars that are going to go around. You know, the apps that you see on your mobile phones, they're also thinking about how to transition that into this sort of dummy vehicle that will be driving you to work or whatever. So it's sort of interesting to see the fear that's within these old school car companies and fighting for survival for the next 10 to 20 years. So I would say sort of general trends. Let's say like an area that I haven't talked about is blockchain. What's interesting, I think the difference, I would say for big companies in Asia right now that I see, even versus the US, is that they're willing to try new technologies. Mm-hmm. So we're active in the blockchain market in the US and in Asia, and we look at some deals in Europe. But the difference is that in the US, all the conversations about blockchain are on the currency and trading. Mm-hmm. You go to Asia, where 2/3 of the trading volume is, especially in Korea and Japan, and it used to be China, half the conversations are actually about enterprise applications. Mm-hmm. So we know, one of the large insurance companies in China, they actually told us they've saved over $200 million on the back end using blockchain technology. One of our companies that went through our accelerator in South Korea, they're now it's called Blocko, they're now the leading enterprise blockchain company in South Korea. Yeah. And they already have large companies such as Hyundai Motors, Samsung Credit Card. Mm-hmm. They have a company called, it's actually a traditional trading platform, Korea Exchange, where they came out with a report that Blocko last year saved them $73 million on the back end. Mm. So you see these companies, and also in China, Ali, JD.com, they all have their own blockchain as a service platform. Yeah. So these companies are willing to try new technologies. Mm-hmm. So that's something that we see as a difference. Big enterprise versus the US versus Europe. So.
Okay, and it was also your aim today by being here, talking to corporates, and because what is the strategy now in Europe for SparkLabs?
In Europe?
Yeah.
Well, actually, in Europe, we are going to expand our accelerator network here. Mm-hmm. I think the first few targets are Paris and somewhere in the Nordics.
Why? Berlin, here.
That's a discussion. We have a partner, Frank Vien, in London, who's going to help map us out. He brought up Berlin, but it's
not... He should call us. I mean,
I know.
What does he know?
I know. I'll have to have a talk with him, so...
Okay, thank you so much for this very insightful talk. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Give it up, ladies and gentlemen.